chapter 3. We're going to be looking at Hebrews chapter 3. I'm going to start in verse 12, and we're going to go through chapter 4, verse 11. As we look at this, as you're turning, we've noted in the first 11 verses of this chapter that we are to consider the faithfulness of the apostle and high priest of our profession, that is Jesus Christ. And in so doing, we noted that his faithfulness guarantees our security because he is faithful. He will finish what he said he would finish. So, in looking at this, starting in verse 12, it says, "Take heed, brethren, lest there be in any of you an evil heart of unbelief in departing from the living God. But exhort one another daily, while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. For we are made partakers of Christ if we hold the beginning of our confidence steadfast unto the end. While it is said, today, if you will hear his voice, harden not your hearts as in the provocation. For some, when they had heard, did provoke, howbeit not all that came out of Egypt by Moses. But with whom was he grieved for 40 years? Was it not them that had sinned, whose carcasses fell in the wilderness? And to whom sware he that they should not enter into his rest, but to them that believe not? So we see that they could not enter in because of unbelief. Let us therefore fear, lest a promise being left us of entering into his rest, any of you should seem to come short of it. For unto us was the gospel preached as well as unto them, but the word preached did not profit them, not being mixed with faith in them that heard it. For we which have believed do enter into rest, as he said, as I've sworn in my wrath, if they shall enter into my rest, although the works were finished from the foundation of the world. For he spake in a certain place of the seventh day on this wise, and God did rest the seventh day from all his works. And in this place again, if they shall enter into my rest, seeing therefore it remaineth that some must enter therein, they to whom it was first preached entered not in because of unbelief. And again he limited a certain day, saying in David, today, after so long a time, as it said today, if you will hear his voice, harden not your hearts. For if Jesus had given them rest, then would he not have afterward spoken of another day. There remaineth therefore rest to the people of God, for he that entereth into his rest, he also hath ceased from his own works, as God did from his. Let us labor therefore to enter into that rest, lest any man fall after the same example of unbelief." I thought I was going to be able to stand up through this, but just reading through this has got me. It's awful that y'all had to put up with an old man, but such as it is, we need a pastor. In Hebrews chapter 3, where we began reading, in Hebrews chapter 3, starting in verse 12, it says, "Take heed, brethren, lest there be in any of you an evil heart of unbelief in departing from the living God. But exhort one another daily, while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin." Now, he starts out by saying, take heed. And we need to, once again, lest we forget who he's talking to, he's talking to Jews. But more specifically, he is talking to saved Jews. So what we see in his warning here is that indeed saved people can get caught up in not believing God. Notice he said, exhort one another daily while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. As we expose ourselves to sin, that very exposure begins to harden our hearts. And I might also remind you that I'm saying expose ourselves. I'm not talking about even if we're not participating. Still, when we expose ourselves to sin on a daily and regular basis, it is going to have an effect on us, and it is going to harden our hearts to the goodness and the righteousness of God. As we condone and allow sin's presence, we will begin to seek justification and exoneration for ourselves, and harden our hearts all that more. All the more. As our minds become deceived to the presence of sin, our heart grows even colder and harder. And as we begin our departure from the presence of the living God, we see this warning: don't let it happen. In verse 14, he says, for we are made partakers of Christ if we hold the beginning of our confidence steadfast unto the end. Now, I've talked a lot about this in the last few messages that I've preached here, and we need to kind of hone in on what we're talking about. What is the subject? What is the context here? And we already see we're talking about saved people. We're talking about saved people who are saved church people. And he establishes this conditional clause. We are made partakers of Christ if we hold the beginning of our confidence steadfast unto the end. I kind of tried to allude to this a little bit in a Sunday school class this morning, Brother Dan, and I'd probably had better voice right now if I'd have kept my mouth shut then. But we need to recognize that this conditional clause says, if we hold the beginning of our confidence steadfast unto the end. When we look at this, we have to try and consider the context of this. And I really don't know how to say this. This is how heretical teachings get started. Verses such as this, if you take it out of context, will tell you that you can lose your salvation. And people who teach that you can lose your salvation use verses such as this to prove their point. But in context, we have to recognize the subject here is church membership. More specifically, brideship. In 2 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 2, Paul, speaking to the Corinthians, said, I'm jealous over you with a godly jealousy. For I want to present you to Christ as a chaste virgin. And so we see in this, Well, there's real benefit to serving God in a local church in this life, but there is much greater benefit to serving Christ in a New Testament church in the life to come. Because we're talking about a bride relationship with Christ. Now, most of you who have heard me speak very much know that I don't believe the church is all of the bride. But I do say this very distinctly. Under the new covenant, there is no way possible that you can be in the bride without being in a New Testament church. Period. This conditional clause speaks of belief and obedience as a prerequisite to this rest. This coincides very specifically with Romans chapter 8 and verse 17. Y'all have to kind of pardon me when I'm a little slow. I get out of breath talking. Romans chapter 8 verse 17 says, "And if children, then heirs, heirs of God, and joint heirs with Christ, if so be that we suffer with him, we may be also glorified together." Now, first of all, I want us to recognize this. I want to remind you of something that I have said many, many times here. Paul did not say we are joint heirs with Christ. He said we are joint heirs of Christ. And in looking at this, what he's saying is we are joint heirs together of Christ if, there's that conditional clause again, if we suffer together. Now, if that don't make sense to you, I don't where you're at. We're made partakers of this in verse 14 of our text. We're made partakers of this, joint heirs together. We are made partakers of this if we hold fast the beginning of our confidence. Is it not wonderful? And I wish I had the energy to just jump up and really and hammer on this, but is it not just wonderful that God gave us a word that is its own best commentary? I mean, very plainly, Romans 8:17 goes hand in hand with Hebrews 3:14. We are made partakers of Christ if we hold the beginning of our confidence steadfast unto the end. Now, he goes on and says in verse 15, "While it is said today, if you will hear his voice, harden not your hearts as in the provocation. For some, when they had heard, did provoke, howbeit not all that came out of Egypt by Moses. When some of them heard God's word and will, they provoked him to wrath." Best I can do is just read you something. Exodus chapter 32, verse 9, "The Lord said unto Moses, I have seen this people, and behold, it is a stiff-necked people. Now therefore let me alone, that my wrath may wax hot against them, and I may consume them, and make of thee a greater nation." In particular, the time that's spoken of here is when they refused to go up into the land the first time around. In Numbers chapter 14, read with me, starting in verse 8. If the Lord delight in us, then he will bring us into this land and give it us, a land which floweth with milk and honey. Only rebel not ye against the Lord, neither fear the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their defense is departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Fear them not. This is Joshua talking to the people. One of the 12 spies. Actually, probably Joshua and Caleb are both speaking. Two of the 12 spies. And they said, hey, we got it. God give it to us. Let's go get it. But all of the congregation bade stone them with stones. And the glory of the Lord appeared in the tabernacle of the congregation before all the children of Israel. And the Lord said unto Moses, how long will this people provoke me? And how long will it be ere they believe me? For all the signs which I have showed among them, I will smite them with pestilence and disinherit them, and will make of thee a greater nation and mightier than they. Folks, they have already witnessed, and we've talked about this. They've already witnessed God's presence in the cloud and in the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire, and how it came up and stood between them and the Egyptian army. We can go today to the Gulf of Aqaba and see where they crossed the Red Sea. Moses held out his staff, and God opened up a path across the Gulf of Aqaba. This was a shallow part of the Gulf of Aqaba, which was only about 30 feet deep. Only 30. Are y'all getting this? Is everybody listening? Only about 30 feet. Not only that, but there wasn't no mud. They crossed. I saw a little thing on Facebook the other day and said there's one in every crowd, and they were all going across the sea, and there was one standing at the side with a fishing pole. But then they didn't have water. And they had water out of a rock. And they had, they came to some bitter waters, and they cleared it up by throwing a rotten stump in it. How many of you have ever come to bitter water and just threw a rotten stump in it and drank it? But they did, and it was good water. Over and over, God proved himself to them. And they get up to the coast of Canaan and say, oh, we can't do it. Of course they can't. You know, They had no reason to doubt God with all that they'd seen. So then, and notice in verse 16, he says, howbeit not all that came out of Egypt by or with Moses, but with whom was he grieved 40 years? Was it not with them that had sinned, whose carcasses fell in the wilderness? You know what? Even though he didn't do it all at once, he still consumed them. Every last one of them that was over 20 years old, with the exception of Joshua and Caleb, dropped dead and they just died in the wilderness. And God fed them and watered them all the way through and took care of them until they all ended up just dying. Have you seen pictures of the Arabian desert, Saudi Arabia? That's where they were. That's the wilderness they were in, wandering around in the blame desert. Now, again, what was the particular sin that was spoken of here? It was that they refused God's instructions about taking the land. God said, there it is, go get it. Joshua and Caleb said, man, it is a beautiful land. And God's gave it to us, let's go. I said, no, we can't do that. All right. Has God not given us some specific instructions as how we are to occupy our homeland until he comes? Oh, now you're going to try and make it personal. Sorry, it is personal. In Luke chapter 19, Jesus gave a parable, and in verse 13 he said unto 10 servants, he called his 10 servants and delivered them 10 pounds and said unto them, occupy till I come. Occupy means do business. Here's a pound apiece, do business. Do business. What's our business? We looked at it just this past week. Make disciples. I pointed out to you the making disciples and baptizing and teaching them, the making of disciples is imperative. Do it. Verse 18 says, and to whom sware he that they should not enter into his rest, but them that believe not? Unbelief has caused more failure than any other cause, both secularly and spiritually. Success most often comes from confidence, and confidence comes from faith. Stepping out on faith. You know, you used to hear that a lot when I was young, and I can still remember. I can actually remember when I was young better than I can remember last week. But I can remember churches stepping out on faith, depending on trusting God to provide the means. It's been played down in the last probably couple of decades. But isn't that because of our own unbelief? You know, is it not a result of our we look at the impossibility of the task rather than the ability of our God? Who's the one that does the work anyway? We're just a tool in God's hand. For Israel to overcome the Amorites, the Amalekites, the Jebusites, and the Canaanites was indeed an impossible task without God. And yet their only failure was to believe Him. You know, I sometimes think we've become too smart for our own good in these last times because, you know, like the Israelites, we look at the impossibility of the task. Oh, we just can't do that. We can't. You know, it's different here in metropolitan St. Louis. That's our number one excuse. It's different here. Now, if you're out in the boondocks, it's different there because there ain't no people. But Paul writing to Timothy in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 7, said, ever learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. You know who he was talking about? He gave a long list in 2 Timothy chapter 3. He says, for men should be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. From such turn away. You know, this list fits more Christians with every day that passes in one form or another. And most of you who've been here in church a while probably know more than the average preacher knew 50 years ago. And I know more than most of you. And that's not trying to put you down. It's simply I've put more time in it than you have. And instead of this knowledge increasing our faith, it seems to have weakened our faith. Up until 10 or so years ago, I was proud of the knowledge that I had, and indeed how hard I'd worked to gain it. But more and more lately, I've come to realize faith in the unknown is more important than, and a far greater asset than all the technical knowledge combined. Believe in God. What I'm talking about is just believing God. Do you believe by the end of this year we could fill this building? No. You say, no. Y'all may smile and nod your head, but you're in here, you're saying, no, ain't no way. Ain't no way. You know what? God can. Hebrews 4:1, let us therefore fear lest a promise being left us of entering into his rest, any of you should seem to come short of it. The point being made here is faith is not a one-time thing that you get it and get it out of the way, but it's something that is ongoing and growing in you. Verse 2 says, for unto us was the gospel preached as well as unto them, but the word preached did not profit them, not being mixed with faith in them that heard it. The gospel that was preached to them was, go up and take the land. Oh, Lord, we can't do it. The gospel, or glad tidings, preached to us is, unto you is given the kingdom, the keys to the kingdom, and whatever you bind or loose on earth is bound and loosed in heaven. You believe that? Apparently we don't. Verse 3, for we which, oh well, I'm usually not this wordy. It's because I'm slow, I guess, today. For we which have believed do enter into rest, as he said, as I have sworn in my wrath, if they shall enter into my rest, although the works were finished from the foundation of the world. The element of faith must be present in everything we do. Jeremy, if you're gonna go and rebuild Grandpa's back brakes, you've got to have confidence that you can do it. And that's what this is saying. We need to have faith in everything we do. It's true of salvation. It's true of every other facet of God's precious plan. The work is all finished. God did it. All we have to do is surrender to it. Believe Him and surrender to it. It's been finished from the foundation of the world. But you must believe. God swore in His wrath, even though the work is done, they must believe if they are to enter His rest. That day at Kadesh Barnea, all they had to do was go in and take it because God was going ahead of them. Today, the only thing we need to do to finish the work God has for us is to believe Him. we see again the dependency upon him as he speaks of the Sabbath when no work is done. Verse 4. For he spake in a certain place of the seventh day on this wise, and God did rest the seventh day from all his works. Some people think this is a reference to the Sabbath as being typical of the millennial reign, when God's people shall truly rest. However, I think it's more in line with acknowledging faith in God, not our works, to provide the rest needed for man. Even after 48 years, I can tell you that it takes God's work to put this old country hick in front of people and speak. And this old country hick still doesn't surrender to him like he ought to. Concerning salvation, there are many who must yet enter into God's rest because they have not thus far believed him. You know what's needed for salvation? Nothing. Just believe him. God did it. What's required of me? Nothing. Just believe him. If I were to do anything to help him, I'd mess it up. And you would too. If there's a lost person here, as it was in the old, so it is in the new covenant. God will not continually call to a rebellious person. Genesis chapter 3 and verse 6, God said, my spirit shall not always strive with man. And we know what happened in chapter 6. The world got wet. Verse 7 says, he has limited the day to today. If the Spirit of God is dealing with your heart this moment, this is the only guaranteed calling you have. If God is dealing with you at this moment, surrender to him. Believe him. What must I do to be saved? Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ. Once again, in verse 8, your own works are not enough. Israel finally entered the land under Joshua, but he never gave them rest because they kept saying, oh, we can't take them. We can do this, but we can't take them. You know, the Jebusites were still in place in what was to become Jericho, or Jerusalem, when David reigned. David. We got Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. All down the line to David. And the Jebusites are still there. You know why? They looked up on that hill and said, we can't take that. We'll just go around it. There remaineth, verses 9 and 10, there remaineth therefore a rest to the people of God, He that entereth into his rest, he hath ceased from his own works, as God did from his. Let us labor, therefore, to enter into that rest, lest any man fall short after the same example of unbelief. Conclusion that I'm going to draw today, and I'm going to ask the song leader to go ahead and finish, come and prepare an invitation. But what I'm going to ask you is this. Won't you cease from your own works? What must I do to be saved? You know, we always ask, what can I do? What can I do? Nothing. Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ. That's it. Just that. Jesus said, take my yoke upon you and learn of me. I'm coming. Today,